Hey, so I know it's been a while since I last put a video out, and it's funny that this particular story should have been mentioned in the news cycle recently, because I have been planning to do this video for weeks. I have had this script written out for weeks, and it's just laziness that I haven't got around to recording it yet. So without further ado, let's get into it. Daniel Morgan was born late 1949 to an army officer in Singapore. He grew up in Wales alongside two siblings, an older brother and a younger sister, and went on to study agriculture at college. Dan married in his late 20s and settled in London. The couple had 2 children together. What makes him special is his exceptional memory for small details, like vehicle number plates. He utilised this skill when he started Southern Investigations, based in Thornton Heath, Croydon Borough, in 1984, and began working as a private detective. And so, fate led his life down the path that would culminate with his brutal murder 3 years later. Daniel's murder is still unsolved, officially speaking, which might be surprising to some given the amount of attention it's had over the years. So what happened? Well, Daniel was drinking in the Golden Lion in Sydenham on the 10th of March 1987 with his PI business partner Jonathan Rees. Afterwards, he left using the back door that led into the car park behind the pub. It was here, near his car, that Daniel's body was found with an axe wound in the back of his head. His trouser pocket had been ripped open. The notes he was witnessed writing earlier were gone. Daniel was alleged to have been close to exposing police corruption, which is a pretty good motive and goes some way to explaining why, after 5 investigations, a failed trial, an independent inquiry, an investigative podcast, and a TV documentary, his murder is still unsolved. Although Daniel's Rolex was missing, I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably unconnected to the motive behind his murder, especially given that he still had a considerable quantity of cash on him. I don't know many thieves that carry an axe in their back pocket. It's more likely Daniel's corpse fell victim to an unscrupulous opportunist before the crime scene was fully secured. His business partner, Jonathan Rees, was arrested for his murder the month after it happened, in April 1987, but released without charge. Rees was one of 3 men in the dock during the 2009 trial at the Old Bailey, the other 2 being Glenn and Gary Ryan brothers. The Director of Public Prosecutions abandoned the case in 2011 and the 3 men were acquitted. Some of the longest legal arguments submitted in a trial in the English criminal courts are involved in this case. The prosecution said defence lawyers mightn't be able to examine all the documents in this case to ensure a fair trial. That's 750,000 pages dating back over 24 years. Initially, a 4th man, James Cook, had also stood alongside the others, but charges were dropped against him before the trial collapsed. So Rees is an obvious suspect, and the fact the Ryan brothers, who were charged with him at trial, were brothers-in-law is just a coincidence, right? Now, he's no saint, but there is a big difference between the corruption he's alleged to have had a hand in and blatant murder. I'm on the fence as to whether he was complicit in Daniel's death, so I'll leave it up to you to decide. What's the police involvement? DS Sid Fillery, who was based at Catford, was initially assigned the case. What he didn't disclose to his superiors was that he'd been working unofficially for Southern Investigations. However, he demanded to be taken off the case because he knew both Morgan and Rees and didn't want to compromise the investigation. Which of the above statements is true depends on the source. In a case with this much misinformation, it's hard to reach the truth. So is the very idea of police corruption as the motive simply another red herring? If there's any truth to the allegations that one of the detectives, not Fillory, showed up drunk at the crime scene, it's entirely possible the police simply fluffed the initial investigation with no malintent. At some point, Fillory retired from the Met and joined Rees as his new partner at Southern Investigations. Rees was in prison, convicted of corruption, when the police raided the company offices and found CP images on Fillory's computer in 2002. I'm not going to tell you what CP means because YouTube doesn't like those words, but I will hope that you can come to that conclusion by yourself. Anyway, he was given a community rehab order and Southern Investigations collapsed. The suicide of DC Alan Holmes, also known as Taffy, in the summer of 1987, has been mentioned in association with Daniel's case. Holmes was alleged to have been an acquaintance of his, but his suicide, I want to say, is likely related to things going on in his life that were unrelated to Dan's murder. Following their inquiry, Hampshire police sent a report to the IPCC in 1989 and stated that no evidence whatsoever had been found of police involvement in Daniel's murder, but like every other facet in this case, that is open to interpretation. Kevin Lennon, an accountant with Southern Investigations, has been quoted as saying Rees told him police friends of his were either going to murder Daniel or arrange it. Another colleague has been quoted as saying he had a chance meeting with Lennon where the man was shaking and said he was sorry he had to do it for his children. They put a lot of pressure on him. So take that as you will. About the only thing we can be certain of is that Daniel died in a pub car park with an axe in the back of his head, and whatever he'd been writing notes about that night was probably very valuable to someone. An axe is undeniably an unusual murder weapon, but it's hard to say what that tells us about the killer, aside from that they have the strength to swing so the axe lodges in the skull. People have discussed at length the police and press corruption surrounding Daniel's murder, and there's a lot of misinformation involved. Somewhere along the way, the truth has been lost, and I don't know if we will ever know who really killed Daniel and what motivated them. I just hope he's at peace.